In Gaza, Palestinian officials say a hospital has been hit by Israeli shells, killing at least 5 people and wounding dozens more. The death toll in Gaza over the past 2 weeks has now reached 550. But in the past 24 hours, the Israeli military said that Hamas has killed 7 Israeli soldiers, with rockets still being fired into Gaza, from Gaza into Israel. Our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucet, has been to the hospital in Deir al-Balah, one of the towns where Palestinians had been advised by the Israelis to go for their own safety.
Today, a place to get well became a place of chaos and death. Israeli tank shells hit Al-Aqsa Hospital, and the shells kept landing in the area. Patients were rushed out to be taken to a safer place, oxygen and all. Nowhere is safe in the Gaza Strip, he says. Doctors were performing surgery and a shell amputated a nurse's hand. In the intensive care unit, 2 patients were killed in their beds. Israel blames Hamas for this tragedy. It says Hamas was storing weapons next to this hospital. 8 officials arrived at the scene to inspect the damage.
We are calling as WHO and the international community for all parties to bring out hospitals and health facilities out of the conflict. We cannot leave these facilities be part of the conflict, because otherwise people will not find any place to get a cure and to get remedy.
In eastern Gaza today, fighting was fierce. Israel continues a ground offensive it said is targeting Hamas's underground tunnels. Tens of thousands of people have fled the area.
Just beyond this bend in this street is the front line in some of the worst fighting now in this war. Shujai, where the Israelis launched their biggest ground offensive yesterday, is on one side of the road. On the other is Zaytun, which is now coming under increased Israeli shelling. And yet, some people are deciding not to leave.
A few streets away, I meet Amer Oda. He heads a family of 45. There's no water in the taps, not much electricity. They can't even cook bread. This is what dinner looks like when you have many mouths to feed. But it's home.
We received Israeli warnings. But where to go? The whole Gaza Strip is just a small box. It doesn't even have a place on the map.
But what about all these children? Dima is 4 and Shahira 3. They've already lived through 2 Gazan wars. It's all they've ever known. Lise Doucet, BBC News, Gaza.
Israel's defence minister says that the offensive in Gaza will continue as long as necessary to stop the Hamas rocket attacks. Israel's air defence system, called Iron Dome, has ensured that Israel has only suffered 2 civilian fatalities so far, despite thousands of rockets being fired. But as we've mentioned, 7 more members of the Israeli military have been reportedly killed since yesterday. Our World Affairs editor, John Simpson, sent this report from Sderot on the Israeli-Gaza border.
Beneath this quiet landscape between Gaza and Israel, Hamas has been working away for months, sometimes years, digging tunnels. At 6 this morning, an Israeli team watched from hiding as Hamas infiltrators dug their way to the surface and opened fire. But they didn't stand a chance. At least 10 members of the Hamas team were killed. These tunnels are impressive, a real feat of engineering. The BBC was allowed to film inside this one recently after it was discovered. The Israelis afterwards make sure the tunnels can't be used again. A few hours after this morning's operation against the Hamas infiltrators, a top government minister came to congratulate the soldiers who'd carried it out. Tzipi Livni is the most dovish member of the Israeli cabinet, plainly worried about the casualties on both sides.
I have to say it to you in these terms. Are you going to carry on killing civilians, including women and children in quite large numbers, until you get what you want?
We are not looking for civilians to kill. We are trying to avoid this. And if you think that we want to send our soldiers, our children, to Sajaira or all these places in which they are being killed, you are mistaken.
This is one reason why casualties on the two sides are so out of proportion. Israel has developed the world's most effective anti-missile defense.
The Iron Dome system's ability to knock Hamas missiles out of the sky has been a remarkable achievement for Israel during this crisis. The success rate is quite phenomenal. Even so, there are missiles which get through.
One of those landed close by here this morning, but the family had taken shelter and scarcely any damage was done. They take it all stoically.
We're here to stay, you know. It's our home.
As she spoke, death and destruction were raining down in Gaza, only 20 miles away, but a different world. All the same, there are funerals of soldiers every day here now. 13 killed yesterday, 7 more today. Here they were burying Moshe Malko, an Israeli of Ethiopian origin. The scale of Israeli and Palestinian deaths may be utterly different, but Israel is paying a heavy price as well. John Simpson, BBC News on the Gaza border.
And for more on the violence taking place on the ground and the US Secretary of State's efforts to mediate a peace in Cairo, I spoke a short time ago with Daniel Kurtzer, who formerly served as US ambassador to both Israel and Egypt. He's now at Princeton University. Daniel Kurtzer, so John Kerry is in Cairo, so is the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. This has all the choreography of a ceasefire, but does one seem close to you?
I don't think so. It looks as though both Israel and Hamas have not yet secured their objectives. The Israelis want to do further damage to the tunnels and to try to degrade Hamas's military capabilities. Hamas wants to prove that it can inflict harm on Israeli soldiers and stand up in this fight. And so I think the ceasefire negotiations are going to proceed apace, but we may be a few days away from any completion of them.
If the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas pushes for a ceasefire, does he have the authority to get Hamas to accept it?
No, almost not at all. He certainly is going to be a player, and I think both Egypt and the United States will try to see whether Abbas and the Palestinian Authority can come out strengthened as a result of this. But he has very little influence over Hamas's decision-making. And Hamas right now is battling for its political survival. It has very little support in the Arab world, and it has less support than it did before in Gaza. So it has to make a good showing of it in Gaza in order to maintain its standing.
Pressure is building on Israel because so many Palestinians are being killed, more than 500. The White House is saying Israel should take greater steps to avoid the deaths of civilians. Is that going to make a difference, do you think, to the Israelis?
Well, you know, the Israelis have actually tried quite hard to avoid civilian casualties, although it hasn't worked. They've sent messages, they've done telephone calls, but these are hard to see through in a situation such as Gaza, where the population is so overwhelmingly compacted in a small area. So it's really a problem. The military wants to accomplish its purposes, trying to avoid civilian casualties, but that's going to be one of the corollaries of this operation.
Well, 2 people died in an intensive care unit inside a hospital in Gaza today.
The humanitarian distress here is really terrible, and there's no excusing it. But you also have to note that this is a war which is taking place in a civilian environment, and these problems are going to occur. Hamas does have a responsibility of trying to avoid emplacing its weapons and its soldiers in those areas, and so far it has not done that.
Is it your guess, just briefly, that this is going to get worse before there is a ceasefire?
I think so, yes. The Israeli military still has objectives to accomplish, and that means there will be more Israeli casualties, and in the course of their actions, there will be more civilian casualties as well. probably in a few days, when both sides have, in a sense, believed that they've accomplished their objectives, they'll be open to the ceasefire efforts of Egypt and the United States.
Ambassador Daniel Kurtzer, thank you very much for joining us.